The villagers gathered before me, their faces weary from years of war and strife. Their eyes, once bright with hope, now seemed dull and hopeless. I had brought them peace, but at what cost? The scars of conflict still lingered, and the people's wounds would take time to heal. As they bid me to take the throne, to lead them into a new era of prosperity and stability, I knew that I could not accept. A man of the sword cannot rule a land of the plow. My skills were honed for battle, not governance. The thought of wielding power over these innocent people was unbearable. I looked out at their expectant faces, my heart heavy with the weight of responsibility. They had come to see me as a savior, but I knew that I was not. I was just a weary warrior, tired of the endless cycle of violence and bloodshed. "I am not the one to lead you," I said softly, trying to convey the gravity of my words. "I have no experience in ruling a land. My skills are limited to fighting wars, not governing a people." The villagers looked at each other uncertainly, their faces reflecting their disappointment. They had hoped that I would be the one to bring them peace and stability, but I knew that I was not capable of doing so. "I will leave," I said finally, my voice firm. "I will return to my wanderings and let you find your own way. You are strong enough to govern yourselves, without the need for a single heir." The villagers nodded slowly, their faces somber. They knew that I was right, but they were also afraid of what lay ahead. Without a leader, the future seemed uncertain, and they feared that they would fall back into the cycle of violence and strife. I nodded sympathetically, my heart heavy with the weight of responsibility. I knew that I had done what was best for them, even if it meant giving up the throne. As I departed the village, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. The thought of ruling over those innocent people had been a heavy burden, one that I knew I was not equipped to carry. I had always been a warrior, and my skills were honed for battle, not governance. I walked for hours, the sun beating down on my back as I made my way through the rolling hills and verdant forests. The silence was a welcome respite from the constant din of war that had filled my ears for so long. I felt my mind begin to clear, free from the weight of responsibility that had been crushing me. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the landscape, I came across a small clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an old oak tree, its branches twisted and gnarled with age. I approached the tree, feeling an inexplicable sense of connection to it. I sat down at the base of the tree, running my hand over the rough bark as I gazed up at its towering height. The silence was almost palpable, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt truly at peace. As night began to fall, I pulled out a small bag of rice and dried fish from my pack, using my dagger to slice into the tough meat. I ate slowly, savoring each bite as I watched the stars begin to twinkle overhead. After finishing my meal, I stood up, stretching my weary muscles. As I looked around the clearing, I noticed a small stream running through it, its crystal clear waters reflecting the starlight like a mirror. Without thinking, I walked over to the edge of the stream and dipped my hand into its cool depths. The water was refreshing, and for a moment I felt like I had left all my troubles behind. But as I stood there, feeling the calm wash over me, I knew that I couldn't stay here forever. I had a mission to complete, one that would require all my skill and cunning. I sat back down at the base of the old oak tree, pulling out a small pouch filled with various tools and devices. Among them was a small, intricately carved wooden box. I opened it slowly, revealing a series of intricate mechanisms inside. These were the plans for the machinery of war that I had created during my time as a warrior. But now I knew that they needed to be dismantled, destroyed forever. The thought of others using these machines to wreak havoc on innocent people was unbearable. I took a deep breath, feeling a surge of determination course through me. This would be my final mission, one that would require all my skill and cunning. And when it was complete, I would vanish into the mountains, leaving behind no trace of myself. As I began to work on the plans, my mind became focused, my thoughts sharp as knives. The silence of the night was almost palpable, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt truly at peace with my decision. I worked through the night, my hands moving deftly over the intricately carved wooden box as I disassembled each mechanism, carefully disabling and destroying them one by one. The silence of the clearing was almost palpable, punctuated only by the soft sound of the stream babbling in the background. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, I finally finished my task. The wooden box lay empty, its contents gone, each piece destroyed or rendered useless. A sense of satisfaction washed over me as I gazed upon the box's empty interior. This was a necessary step towards ensuring that the machinery of war would never again be used to harm innocent people. But with this decision came a weighty responsibility. As I stood up from my seat at the base of the oak tree, stretching my weary muscles, I knew that I had to be gone before anyone discovered what I had done. The villagers were already whispering about me taking the throne, and if they found out that their savior was secretly dismantling the very machinery he had once created, they would likely become disillusioned and angry. I took a deep breath, my mind racing with the logistics of disappearing without a trace. It wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to make it happen. As I began to gather up my tools and devices, I noticed something glinting in the early morning light. A small, intricately carved wooden flute lay nestled among the leaves at my feet. I picked it up, running my thumb over the delicate grooves etched into its surface. It was a gift from my sensei, passed down through generations of warriors. I had forgotten all about it, left it behind in the chaos of battle. Now, as I held it in my hand, memories flooded back, the soft music filling the dojo on quiet mornings, the way the notes seemed to dance across the tatami mats. I brought the flute to my lips, feeling a lump form in my throat as I took a tentative breath. The sweet, mournful melody that flowed from its wooden body was like nothing else. It was a call to peace, a reminder of the beauty and simplicity that lay beyond the chaos of war. As I played, the silence of the clearing seemed to deepen, the stars twinkling overhead like diamonds scattered across the velvet expanse. For a moment, all my doubts and fears vanished, replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose. This was what I had been searching for all along, not power or recognition, but a chance to make amends, to leave behind a legacy that would be remembered long after I was gone. The music drifted away on the morning breeze, leaving me standing alone in the clearing. But as I looked around, something shifted within me. The landscape seemed different, too. The trees seemed taller, their branches more delicate, the stream's gentle song now a reminder of the beauty that lay just beneath the surface. I knew then that this was not just a physical journey, but a spiritual one as well. To disappear without a trace meant leaving behind all my old habits and patterns, embracing a new path that would lead me to true freedom. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a mix of excitement and trepidation. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its golden light across the clearing, I knew that it was time to set out on this final mission. I tucked the wooden flute into my belt, feeling a sense of calm wash over me as I gazed out at the world around me. The true strength of a free people lay not in a single hero, but in their own united hands. And now, it was time for me to let go and trust that they would rise up to meet their own destiny. I set out under the rising sun, the wooden flute still secured at my belt. The silence of the clearing lingered within me, a reminder of the clarity and purpose I had discovered in that moment. As I walked, the landscape shifted, much like it had when I gazed upon it with newfound eyes. The trees seemed taller, their branches more delicate, and the stream's gentle song now whispered secrets of freedom. I wandered through the mountains, my footsteps quiet on the rocky terrain. My mind was a jumble of thoughts, but one idea dominated: to dismantle the machinery of war I had created. It was a daunting task, but I knew it was essential to prevent myself from becoming the very tyrant I once overthrew. As the sun reached its zenith, I came upon a small village nestled between two great peaks. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimneys, and the sound of hammers ringing out against anvil carried on the breeze. I watched for a while, taking in the simple, peaceful life of these people. They were not unlike those I had saved from the brink of destruction, but now they were free to build their own destinies. I continued on my way, eventually arriving at the stronghold where my war machines were stored. The imposing structure loomed before me, a testament to the power and fear I once inspired. My heart heavy with the weight of responsibility, I steeled myself for what lay ahead. As I entered the stronghold, I was met by the sight of rows upon rows of armaments, cannons, catapults, and trebuchets, all silent and still. But it was not the machines themselves that concerned me, it was the minds and hearts that had once driven them. The soldiers who had fought alongside me, the villagers who had suffered under our rule. I spent the day dismantling the machinery of war, piece by piece. It was a laborious process, but I knew it was necessary. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood before the empty stronghold, feeling a sense of relief and trepidation. What lay ahead for these people? Would they be able to find their own strength, or would they continue to rely on a single hero? As night fell, I walked away from the stronghold, leaving behind the remnants of my past. The darkness was oppressive, but I felt a sense of freedom in abandoning the burdens of leadership. The stars twinkled above, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure watching me from the shadows. It was just my imagination, but the feeling lingered as if the universe itself was urging me on. I pressed onward, the silence of the night punctuated only by the sound of crickets and distant waterfalls. The mountains rose up around me, their peaks reaching for the stars like nature's own sentinels. I knew that I would soon be vanishing into these shadows, leaving behind all my old habits and patterns. The thought sent a shiver down my spine as I walked on, the darkness swallowing me whole. And yet, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, for I had done what needed to be done. The true strength of a free people lay not in a single hero, but in their own united hands. It was time for me to let go and trust that they would rise up to meet their own destiny. As the darkness deepened, I stopped at the edge of a clearing, my eyes adjusting slowly to the starlight. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient tree, its branches twisted and gnarled with age. I felt drawn to it, as if it held some secret or message for me. I approached the tree, feeling the weight of my journey settling upon me. The silence was palpable, and yet I knew that this was where my true strength lay. Not in my sword arm or strategic mind, but in my willingness to let go and trust in the power of others. As I reached out to touch the ancient tree's bark, a sense of clarity washed over me. This was not just a physical journey, but a spiritual one as well. To disappear without a trace meant leaving behind all my old habits and patterns, embracing a new path that would lead me to true freedom. The thought sent a surge of excitement through me, for I knew that this was the only way to truly make amends. With a deep breath, I vanished into the shadows, leaving behind the remnants of my past and the burdens of leadership. The darkness swallowed me whole, but I felt a sense of peace settle over me, for I had finally found my true strength. As I dissolved into the night, the silence enveloped me like a shroud. I allowed myself to become one with the darkness, letting go of all ties to my former life. The ancient tree stood sentinel, its twisted branches whispering secrets in the wind. I felt an eerie calm wash over me as I allowed myself to merge with the shadows. I wandered through the forest, unencumbered by the burdens of leadership or the weight of my own expectations. My footsteps were quiet on the damp earth, and the tree seemed to lean in, listening to my every thought. It was as if the very forest itself was conspiring to help me find the path I sought. As the hours passed, the darkness began to recede, replaced by a soft moonlit glow. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers and the distant chirping of crickets. I felt my spirit stirring, awakening from its long slumber. It was as if the forest itself was awakening me to the true nature of reality. I stumbled upon a clearing, where a small stream babbled and chattered its way through the heart of the woods. The water's gentle song seemed to be calling out to me, drawing me closer to the secrets it held. I followed the stream, my feet sinking into the soft earth as I waded through the shallow waters. As I walked, the moon rose higher in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the forest. The trees seemed to grow taller and more majestic, their branches reaching up towards the stars like outstretched arms. I felt a sense of peace settle over me, as if I had finally found my true home. I reached the edge of the clearing and stopped, gazing out at the serene beauty before me. A figure stood waiting for me, shrouded in shadows. It was an old man, his face weathered and wise beyond measure. He nodded to me, his eyes twinkling like stars. "You have come," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I knew you would find your way here." I approached him cautiously, unsure what lay ahead. The old man gestured to a small fire burning at the edge of the clearing. It was a tiny flame, but it seemed to hold the power of 1,000 suns. "Come," he said again. "Sit with me, and let us speak of the things that matter most." I sat down beside him, feeling the warmth of the fire spread through my chill bones. The old man nodded, his eyes glinting in the flickering light. "You have walked the path of destruction, but you also hold the power to create anew," he said, his voice a gentle breeze on a summer's day. "You must let go of your past and trust that the forest will guide you towards true freedom." I listened intently, feeling my heart open up to the wisdom being shared with me. The old man spoke of the interconnectedness of all living things, of the delicate balance between light and darkness. He spoke of the power of forgiveness and the importance of letting go. As he spoke, I felt my spirit stirring once more. It was as if the very forest itself was awakening something deep within me. I knew that I had been given a rare gift, the chance to start anew, free from the burdens of my past. The old man's words lingered in my mind like the scent of blooming flowers. I knew that I would carry them with me on my journey forward, using them as a guide to navigate the twists and turns that lay ahead. As I sat by the fire, listening to the old man's wisdom, I couldn't help but think of the wandering samurai. His story was one of destruction and chaos, but also of redemption and transformation. And yet, as much as he had changed, I knew that his path was not mine to follow. The old man's words echoed in my mind as we parted ways, leaving me with a sense of clarity and purpose. I knew that I had been given a rare gift, the chance to start anew, free from the burdens of my past. But what about the wandering samurai? Had he found his own path to redemption? I didn't have long to wonder. As we said our goodbyes, the old man handed me a small pouch filled with seeds. "Plant them in fertile soil," he whispered, his eyes twinkling with knowing. "And remember, the true strength of a free people lies not in a single hero, but in their own united hands." I watched as he vanished into the trees, leaving me to ponder the mysteries of the forest. The wandering samurai's story was one of destruction and chaos, but also of redemption and transformation. And yet, as much as he had changed, I knew that his path was not mine to follow. Days passed, and I found myself drawn back to the village where the wandering samurai had once reigned supreme. The villagers were celebrating a newfound peace, their faces lit up with hope and gratitude. But as I watched them, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. They were still trapped in the shadow of his legacy, still looking to him for salvation. I knew that I had been given a rare gift, the chance to start anew, free from the burdens of my past. And yet, as much as I wanted to leave the wandering samurai's story behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching and waiting. As night fell on the village, I found myself standing outside the wandering samurai's old hut. It was dark and silent, the only sound the distant hum of crickets. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should knock or leave him be. But something compelled me to take a step forward, my heart beating with anticipation. The door creaked open, revealing the wandering samurai standing in the dimly lit interior. His eyes were sunken, his face gaunt, and yet there was an air of peace about him that I had never seen before. He beckoned me inside, and I followed, feeling a sense of trepidation wash over me. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice slow and gravelly. I took a deep breath, trying to find the words to express what I was feeling. "I've come to bid you farewell," I said finally. "You are free to leave this place behind, to start anew." The wandering samurai nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. And in that moment, I knew that he had found his own path to redemption, a path of destruction and chaos, yes, but also one of forgiveness and transformation. As we parted ways, the wandering samurai handed me a small, intricately carved wooden box. "For you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. And with that, he vanished into the night, leaving me to ponder the mysteries of the forest once more. I opened the box, finding it filled with tiny, delicate seeds. The old man's words echoed in my mind: plant them in fertile soil, and remember, the true strength of a free people lies not in a single hero, but in their own united hands. I knew that I would carry these seeds with me on my journey forward, using them as a guide to navigate the twists and turns that lay ahead. I stood outside the wandering samurai's door, feeling a mix of emotions as I watched him disappear into the night. The seeds he had given me seemed insignificant in my hands, but his words echoed in my mind like a mantra. I thought back to our conversations, and how he had struggled with the weight of his own redemption. He had found a way to make amends for his past, but at what cost? I took a deep breath, feeling the cool mountain air fill my lungs. The village was quiet, the only sound being the distant chirping of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. I closed my eyes, letting the stillness wash over me. As I stood there, I noticed a figure watching me from the shadows. It was one of the villagers, her face creased with concern. She beckoned me over, her eyes darting back to the wandering samurai's door as if worried he might reappear at any moment. "What is it?" I asked, walking towards her. "The others are gathering," she whispered. "They want you to come and speak with them." I followed her to a small clearing near the edge of the village. The villagers were assembled, their faces lit by the soft glow of lanterns. They seemed subdued, their eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. As I approached, they parted to allow me through. At the center stood the wandering samurai's most loyal followers, the ones who had risked everything to help him overthrow the tyrant. Now they looked at me with a mixture of pleading and expectation. I raised my hands, trying to stem the tide of emotions that threatened to overwhelm us all. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice firm but gentle. The leader of the group stepped forward, his eyes burning with determination. "We beg you to take the throne," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "You're the only one who can bring peace and prosperity back to our land." I felt a surge of panic at their words. The wandering samurai had warned me against this very thing, that a man of the sword cannot rule our land of the plow. I thought back to our conversations, trying to find the right words. "My friends," I began, my voice firm but compassionate. "I understand your desire for stability and security, but I must tell you that taking the throne is not the answer. The wandering samurai has shown us that true strength lies not in a single hero, but in our own united hands." The villagers looked at each other uncertainly, their faces falling as they realized what I was saying. The leader of the group took a step forward, his eyes blazing with anger. "You're abandoning us," he spat. "We thought you were different, that you would bring hope and change to our land." I felt a pang of sadness at their words. They had put so much faith in me, and I was forced to tell them that I could not be the savior they needed. But as I looked around at their faces, I knew that I had to stand by my convictions. "I am not abandoning you," I said firmly. "I'm offering you a chance to take control of your own destiny. You have the power to create the change you desire. All it takes is unity and determination." The villagers looked at each other, their faces slowly falling into place. They nodded, one by one, as they began to understand what I was saying. As we parted ways, I felt a sense of hope rising within me. The wandering samurai had set an example, and now it was time for the villagers to follow in his footsteps. Together, we could build a new future, one where strength came from unity and cooperation, rather than a single hero. I walked back to my small cottage on the outskirts of the village, feeling the weight of responsibility settle upon me. The seeds the wandering samurai had given me seemed like a symbol of hope, tiny, delicate, and yet full of potential. I knew that I would carry them with me as I navigated the twists and turns ahead, using them to guide me towards a brighter future for all. As I walked through the forest, the silence was oppressive. The weight of my decision hung heavy on my shoulders like an unseen cloak. The villagers' faces still lingered in my mind, the disappointment, the anger, and finally, the understanding. They had come to realize that true strength lay not in a single hero, but in their own collective power. I reached the outskirts of the forest, where the trees gave way to rolling hills and a distant range of mountains. The wind rustled through the grasses, carrying the whispers of my past. I had always been drawn to these mountains, seeking solace in their rugged beauty and freedom from the expectations of others. As I climbed higher, the air grew thinner, and the silence deepened. I felt the samurai's weightlessness, as if the mantle of responsibility was slowly lifting off my shoulders. The villagers' words still echoed in my mind, "You're abandoning us." But I knew that I wasn't leaving them, I was giving them a chance to find their own strength. The path narrowed, and I found myself standing at the edge of a precipice, gazing out upon a sea of mist-shrouded peaks. The wind howled across the mountainside, whipping my hair into a frenzy as I stood there, frozen in contemplation. It was here that I would lay the samurai's sword to rest, just as he had laid his own sword to rest when he walked away from the world. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my decision settle upon me once more. The villagers' faces receded into the distance, replaced by the ghosts of those I had left behind, the people I had saved, the families I had reunited. The stories would forever be etched in my mind like the lines on an old warrior's face. I reached into my pack and withdrew a small pouch containing the seeds the wandering samurai had given me. They seemed insignificant now, but I knew that they held the potential to grow into something greater, a symbol of hope, just as he had said. As I gazed out at the mountains, I felt a sense of resolve wash over me. It was time for me to take up my own sword, not against the forces of war and oppression, but against the machinery of war itself. I began to walk, the mist swirling around my legs as I descended into the valley below. The wind carried the distant rumble of drums, the clash of steel on steel, and the cries of the wounded. The sounds were familiar yet distant, a reminder that the cycle of violence would continue until someone had the courage to challenge it. As I walked, the landscape began to shift, revealing the outlines of fortifications, walls, towers, and gates. It was an old citadel, once a symbol of power and strength, now a relic of a bygone era. The villagers' words echoed in my mind, "You're abandoning us." But I knew that I wasn't leaving them, I was giving them the chance to take up their own arms. I approached the gates, my heart pounding in time with the drums. The guards, once fierce warriors, now stood as hollow sentinels, their eyes glazed over by the weight of years. As I passed through the gates, I felt a sense of trepidation. The samurai's sword was heavy in my hand, and the path ahead would be fraught with danger. The citadel's interior was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, each one a testament to the wars that had been fought and lost. The air reeked of smoke and sweat, heavy with the scent of desperation. I walked through the shadows, the sounds of combat growing louder as I approached the heart of the citadel. In the great hall, I found myself face to face with the machines of war, cannons, muskets, and swords. The drums beat out a rhythm of chaos, as if they knew that the end was near. And in the midst of this chaos, I knew that I would find my own sword, waiting for me like an old friend. As I reached for the sword, the weight of responsibility settled upon me once more. It was time to take up the mantle of the wandering samurai, not as a warrior, but as a force for change. I grasped the hilt of my sword, feeling the familiar weight and balance in my hand. The drums still pounded out their rhythmic beat, but now they seemed to be calling me, urging me to take action. I looked around at the machines of war, the instruments of destruction that had once served me so well. But I knew that this time was different. This time, I wasn't seeking to conquer or dominate. I was here to dismantle, to destroy the very machinery that had been my greatest ally in times past. I began to move through the citadel, my sword at the ready. The guards, once fierce and formidable, now watched me with a mixture of confusion and fear. They didn't know what to make of this new version of myself, the wandering samurai who seemed intent on destroying everything he had once fought for. As I walked, the sounds of chaos began to fade away, replaced by an eerie silence. The drums ceased their pounding, and the machines of war lay still, like giants awakened from a long slumber. I approached each one with a sense of reverence, feeling a deep connection to these instruments that had once served me so well. But now, they were nothing more than relics of a bygone era, reminders of the destruction and devastation that war brought. And I was here to destroy them, to render them useless, to prevent them from ever being used again. I began with the cannons, the largest and most destructive of the machines. My sword sliced through their metal heart, rendering them silent and still. Then I moved on to the muskets, the barrels as smooth as silk beneath my blade. And finally, I came to the swords, the ones that had once been mine. As I destroyed each machine, a sense of peace settled over me. It was as if I were exorcising some deep-seated demon, ridding myself of the ghosts of war that had haunted me for so long. The citadel began to feel empty and still, like a tomb devoid of life or purpose. And yet, even as I destroyed these machines, a part of me knew that this was not the end. This was merely the beginning of a new chapter in my journey, one where I would use my skills and knowledge to build something new, something different. I walked through the citadel, my sword now empty and still its work done. The drums were silent, the machines lay still, and the gods watched me with a mixture of confusion and fear. But I knew that I had made the right decision, that this was the only way to truly bring peace to these lands. As I emerged from the citadel, the sun began to set over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the landscape. I felt a sense of closure, a sense of completion. The wandering samurai had done what he had set out to do. He had dismantled the machinery of war, and in doing so, had given the people a chance to build something new. I looked out at the villagers, who were watching me with a mixture of awe and gratitude. They didn't know what I had just done, but they knew that it was something big, something important. And as I walked away from the citadel, leaving behind the machines of war and the ghosts of conflict, I knew that I had given them something truly special. I had given them the chance to be free. As I disappeared into the mountains, the villagers began to stir, their whispers spreading like wildfire through the province. They spoke of my departure in hushed tones, their eyes gleaming with a mix of sadness and understanding. I had left behind no explanation, no farewell speech or gesture. It was as if I had vanished into thin air, leaving only the faintest whisper of my presence. Some said it was a sign of my humility, that I knew my work was done and there was nothing more for me to do. Others whispered that I had simply grown tired of the weight of responsibility, that the mantle of heroism had become too heavy to bear. But I knew the truth. I knew that I had left behind the very thing that threatened to consume me, the throne. The villagers had bid me to take it, to rule over them and bring order to their lands. But I knew that a man of the sword could not rule a land of the plow. I had seen the devastation war had wrought. I knew that the only way to truly bring peace was to give the people the freedom to forge their own path. As I climbed higher into the mountains, the silence grew thicker, like a blanket of snow wrapped around me. I walked with my eyes fixed on the ground, my footsteps echoing through the stillness. I had no destination in mind, no purpose other than to keep moving, to keep putting one foot in front of the other. The days blurred together, the sun rising and setting with monotonous regularity. I slept under the stars, waking each morning to find that nothing had changed, that the world outside my small circle of existence remained untouched. And yet, as the silence grew deeper, so did my thoughts. I began to wonder if I had made a mistake, if I had abandoned my duty to the people who needed me most. Had I been selfish in leaving behind the throne, in refusing to take up the mantle of leadership? I pushed these doubts aside, telling myself that I was doing what was right, that I was giving the people the chance to govern themselves. But the questions lingered, like a shadow at my heels. One day, as I crested a ridge, I saw a small village nestled in the valley below. Smoke curled lazily from the chimneys, and children played in the streets, their laughter carrying up to me on the wind. I felt a pang of longing, a sense of belonging that I had not experienced in years. I began to make my way down the mountain, my footsteps growing slower as I approached the village. The people looked up at me with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, unsure what to make of this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere. But I was not there to stay. I was just passing through, on my final mission to prove that the true strength of a free people lay not in a single hero, but in their own united hands. I walked through the village, taking note of the way the people worked together, of the way they relied on each other for support and sustenance. I saw children helping their parents with chores, older villagers sharing stories and laughter around fireside gatherings. And I knew that this was what I had been searching for all along, not a throne or a title, but a community built on mutual respect and trust. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the village in a warm orange glow, I made my way to the outskirts. There, I gathered up handfuls of earth and began to shape it into small, unobtrusive statues, symbols of hope and resilience, reminders that even in the darkest of times, there was always the possibility for renewal. I placed these statues around the village, setting them down with a quiet reverence. And as I did, I felt a sense of completion, a sense of closure. The wandering samurai had done what he had set out to do. He had given the people the chance to be free, to build their own futures without the weight of war or tyranny holding them back. As I vanished into the night, leaving behind the village and its newfound hope, I knew that this was not the end. This was merely the beginning of a new chapter in my journey, one where I would continue to wonder, but with a purpose to inspire others to take up the mantle of leadership, to give them the chance to forge their own paths. And so, as the darkness swallowed me whole, I smiled, knowing that the true strength of a free people lay not in a single hero, but in their own united hands. I traversed the desolate landscape, my footsteps quiet on the barren earth. The weight of my sword hung heavy at my side, a constant reminder of the path I had chosen to take. As the sun rose over the horizon, casting its golden light upon the terrain, I felt the sense of freedom wash over me. Free from the burdensome responsibility of ruling, free from the expectations of others, and free to follow my own heart. I walked for hours, lost in thought, as the landscape blurred together in a haze of grey and brown. My mind wandered back to the village, to the people I had left behind. I wondered if they would ever forget the wandering samurai, or if they would learn to forge their own paths without my guidance. As the sun began its descent into the western sky, I spotted a figure in the distance. A young girl, no more than 10 winters old, stood tall and proud, her eyes fixed intently on some point ahead. I approached her cautiously, not wanting to startle her. As I drew closer, I saw that she was holding a small, intricately carved wooden statue. "Ah, little one," I said softly, not wanting to scare her away. "What's caught your eye?" The girl turned to me, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "I'm waiting for someone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I knelt down beside her, my gaze fixed on the statue in her hand. It was one of the small figurines I had created, a symbol of hope and resilience. A smile spread across my face as I realized that this young girl had found it and that she had been waiting for me. "I'm the wandering samurai," I said, my voice filled with a sense of pride and purpose. "And you are?" The girl's eyes lit up and she nodded eagerly. "I'm Miko. I've been watching you from afar, following your path. You are the one who brought peace to our village." I chuckled, feeling a sense of warmth spread through my chest. Yes. The villagers have given me many names, but Wandering Samurai is my favorite. Miko's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Can you show me where you go from here? I want to follow in your footsteps." I looked at her, and for a moment, I saw the world through her innocent eyes. The thought of sharing my journey with this young girl filled me with a sense of joy and purpose. "Miko," I said, smiling down at her, "I have one final mission to complete. After that, it'll be vanishing into the mountains, leaving behind only memories and statues like this one." Her face fell, but then she looked up at me with determination in her eyes. "Then I'll follow you, sensei. I'll learn from you, and when you're gone, I'll carry on your legacy." I laughed, feeling a sense of pride and responsibility wash over me. This young girl was the embodiment of everything I had fought for: freedom, hope, and resilience. "Miko," I said, my voice filled with conviction, "you don't have to follow me. The villagers need you more than they need me. You can be their leader, their guide. You can help them forge their own paths and build a brighter future." Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she nodded eagerly. "I will. I'll do it for the village, and I'll do it for myself." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the landscape in a warm orange glow, I smiled, knowing that my work was almost done. The Wandering Samurai's final mission lay ahead, but with Miko by my side, I knew that the true strength of this free people would not lie in a single hero, but in their own united hands. I stood tall, my eyes scanning the horizon as the sun dipped below the mountains. The air was crisp and clean, filled with the scent of blooming cherry blossoms. It was a moment of perfect clarity, a time when all seemed right with the world. "Miko," I said, turning to her with a sense of finality in my voice. "Today is the day I embark on my final mission." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded bravely. "I know, sensei. You've told me about dismantling the machinery of war and vanishing into the mountains. But are you sure that's what you want to do?" I smiled wryly. "What else can I do? A man of the sword cannot rule a land of the plow. The villagers need someone with a deeper understanding of their struggles, someone like Miko here." Miko's face lit up with determination. "I'll do it, sensei. I'll lead the village and help them build a brighter future." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "You will, Miko. But first, I must see this through. I owe it to myself and to the people who have suffered at the hands of war." As we walked towards the edge of the village, the villagers began to emerge from their homes, curious about the commotion. They looked at me with a mix of sadness and understanding in their eyes. The Wandering Samurai's time was coming to an end. It was a bittersweet feeling, knowing that I would soon be gone, but also knowing that Miko would take my place as the leader of this village. We reached the edge of the village, where I had prepared a small cart filled with the machinery of war: swords, bows, and cannons. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the task ahead. "This is it," I said, looking at Miko. "This is my final act as the Wandering Samurai. They'll dismantle this machinery, and then it'll disappear into the mountains. Emiko's eyes filled with tears. Sensei, please be careful. I smiled reassuringly. Don't worry, Emiko. This is what I've been training for. I'm ready to face whatever lies ahead. With a deep breath, I began to dismantle the machinery of war piece by piece. The villagers watched in silence as the once feared wandering samurai transformed into a humble warrior, sacrificing his own power and influence for the greater good. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I finished my task. The machinery lay scattered on the ground, a testament to my determination to bring about lasting peace. I turned to Emiko, my eyes filled with pride. It's done, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The wandering samurai has fulfilled his mission. Emiko approached me, her face etched with sadness and gratitude. Sensei, thank you. You've given us so much more than just peace. You've given us hope and resilience. I smiled, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. That's all any of us can ask for, I said, my voice filled with conviction. May the true strength of this free people lie in their own united hands, not in a single hero like myself. With those words, I turned and disappeared into the mountains, leaving behind only memories and statues like the one Emiko had carved earlier that day. The wandering samurai's journey was at an end, but his legacy would live on through the young girl who had followed him every step of the way. As the darkness enveloped me, I felt a sense of peace settle over my soul. I knew that I had made the right decision, one that would bring about lasting change and hope to this war-torn land. And so I vanished into the mountains, leaving behind only the whisperers of a legend who had brought peace to the province, but at what cost? I walked for hours, my footsteps quiet on the mountain path. The darkness was absolute, punctuated only by the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the sky above. I felt a sense of freedom in the silence, unencumbered by the weight of responsibility or expectation. As I climbed higher, the air grew cooler and the trees became more sparse. I could see the lights of a village in the distance, but I knew it was best to avoid human contact for now. My mission was almost complete, but I still had one final task to undertake. I reached into my pack and pulled out a small pouch of matches. Lighting one, I took a deep breath of the crisp mountain air and began to make my way down the mountain, the flame casting eerie shadows on the trees around me. As I walked, I thought about all that had transpired since my arrival in this province. The battles, the bloodshed, the destruction, it was all behind me now. But what lay ahead? I knew that I couldn't stay here forever, but for now I just needed some time to reflect on everything. The village below grew larger as I descended, and I could see people going about their daily lives. They looked up at me briefly, curious about the stranger in their midst, but they didn't approach. I was a ghost from the past, a reminder of the wars that had ravaged this land. I continued on my way, passing through the outskirts of the village and into the surrounding forest. The trees grew closer here, forming a natural barrier between the village and the rest of the world. It was a place where people rarely ventured, preferring to leave the secrets of the forest undisturbed. As I walked deeper into the forest, I noticed something strange, a series of symbols etched into the trunks of the trees. They seemed to be some sort of code or message, but I couldn't decipher their meaning. It was as if someone had left me a final clue, a reminder that there was still more to my journey than just vanishing into the mountain. I followed the symbols for a while longer, until they led me to a small clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient tree, its branches twisted and gnarled with age. I could feel a strange energy emanating from it, as if it held some sort of power or wisdom. I approached the tree slowly, feeling a sense of reverence wash over me. As I reached out to touch the trunk, I heard a soft whispering in my ear, words that only I could hear. You have fulfilled your mission, the voice said. You have brought peace to this land, but at what cost? Remember that the true strength of a free people lies not in a single hero like yourself, but in their own united hands. I stood there for a long time, listening to the tree's words and reflecting on my journey. It was as if the forest itself was reminding me of the wisdom I have gained over the years, that leadership wasn't about personal power or glory, but about empowering others to take control of their own destiny. As I stood there, the wind began to pick up, rustling through the leaves and carrying the whispers away. The symbols on the trees seemed to fade into nothingness, as if they had been meant only for me to see. I turned and walked back through the forest, feeling a sense of peace settle over my soul once more. I knew that I had made the right decision in vanishing into the mountains. It was time for me to let go of my past and allow this province to move forward without me. As I emerged from the forest, I caught sight of Emiko waiting for me by the edge of the village. She looked up at me with a mixture of sadness and understanding in her eyes. She knew that our journey together was coming to an end. I smiled at her, feeling a sense of gratitude and closure wash over me. It's time for me to go, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Emiko nodded, her face etched with emotion. I know, she said. But remember, the true strength of this free people lies in their own united hands, not a single hero like yourself. I nodded, feeling a sense of acceptance and release. As I walked away from the Miko, I knew that my journey was truly at an end. The wandering samurai had brought peace to this land, but it was time for me to vanish into the mountains, leaving behind only memories and the whispers of a legend who had changed the course of history.